welcome flame. What I can do, I can use the side, I think, because these panels don't intersect. And I'll use this again as an example. What's going to happen here is this piece will be cut to fit on like that. So that's what it'll look like from the end. But that's what I'm looking at, so that you can see that the joint on the corner really doesn't have to be anything really accurate. So maybe what I can do, since I have this width to eyeball, maybe I can do this. Get my square out and eyeball where this thing goes. A little bit of a challenge because this is tight together. How do I get glue in? I messed myself up there. I can manage. So you can see where that needs to go, so that needs to be cut off. Well, this is what I'm going to do here. This is a marking knife. Allows me to make very accurate marks on the wood. It's flat on one side, double on the other, and extremely sharp. I can take my ruler, line it with my panel, and get it lined up nicely with this side. And then do the same thing over here. Mark it with my knife. I think the top and the base should have been bigger. But unless I'm going to cut it all again, it's not going to be bigger. So you can see that mark I made there. And I can slide that right over to that mark, and then all I need to do is square it. My trouble is my glue is going to make a mess of my mark. Put some glue on here. I don't want to go too crazy with glue, however, this is kind of structural to holding the sides on and holding the base on. So I want to make sure there's enough. And then to respect my mark, I'll just put glue here. All right. I was trying to do it the wrong way. It doesn't go in that way. All right. So a ton of squeeze out at the end. That's okay. On my hand, everywhere. I don't want to get glue on the table saw here. Kind of not the best situation. I'll bring that into that line. Using my new eye for that, you know, I can actually see that. And then I will square that up. This is my marked side, so any adjustment needs to be made. Needs to be done on this side, which does need to go in just a little. Oh, it's starting to grab. This glue grabs fast. Go more yet. Tiny bit more. Okay. Now I can flip that over. I believe that will work. Take this, check my work. This is a bigger clamp, it's just not as nice a clamp. I don't use it very much. But I need to squeeze that together. I guess that's as squeezed as it's going to get. Alright, set that one aside. Do the same thing with this one. I never thought about that before. The irony is, a friend made this for me, and his name is Mark. So, apropos. Okay. Come on. It's going to be stubborn. Takes a good little whack to make that move. That's square. Yeah, go to use the clamp and it falls apart. Oh yeah, a nut fell out of this one. Okay. Any of the squeeze out there, I'll clean up once those are set. I needed to let all this set before I can do anything else. I've taken this cherry wood one out of the clamps, and I think what I'll do is I'll try to glue this side panel on. So I've done a test fit here, and what I'm looking for is that where the side panel fits here, it can't sit proud of this because this piece needs to sit flush on there. And if there's any gap, then when that sits on there, you'll see that gap in the top. So I'm gonna glue this on here. What I've done is it did sit proud a little, so I've run this sanding block again across that just to bring that down a little. And so I'm gonna glue this here. And then I'll put that piece on. I don't know if I'll put that piece on right now. Put a little bit of glue on that. I do tend to use way too much glue. It's not so bad when I'm building beekeeping equipment. But when I'm building furniture, I have to be more careful. I think that's the side. Okay. And this piece, I can't do both these sides at once, so this one's just going to be a prop under that. And I believe that is going to sit until that glue sets. Set that aside. And I can look at this one. Do the same thing. When I adjusted the router fence, when I was cutting that rabbet and I adjusted the router fence, I shouldn't have done that because I think it was good the way it was. I want to break the corners too. Fitting a corner into a corner, it doesn't fit very well. If you round this corner or chamfer it even, then it doesn't need to go tight into the corner. Then things fit better. Carefully sand the front a little. Bit of an edge here from the router table. Not too concerned about sanding the inside too much. Okay, that's flush all the way down there. So I'll do the same. A little bit of glue. This one for a prop. And you've seen me do this before for a prop. Stand something vertical, just put a clamp on it, and that gives it a foot. Okay, that's good. Very good. And that's it for another few hours till that sets, and then I can do the other side. I've got the little base units out of glue, and I want to route that profile because I'm going to need to install this pretty soon. So I need that profile routed. Before I can do that, I need to flush up this end. So I decided to do that on the radial arm saw. I'm going to have to really sneak up on this because it doesn't matter. It's okay if I kind of skin along this end of it, but I don't want to take a lot off of there. So we'll see how this goes. Doesn't look like it's quite square. It's gonna be. It's gonna be in a second. Not quite yet. Yeah, nice burn there right at the end. I maybe sand that off, but I'm not sure. This one's shorter for some reason. Obviously got it. Yeah, not square. I didn't do a very good job of that. It's really going to affect my assembly at the end. Okay, that's smooth, but that's not quite square. I've got what's called an OG bit set up in the router table, and just did a test profile, and this is the profile that it cuts. Okay, and so I'm planning to route that profile all the way around these bases, so it'll be like that. I think that'll work out nicely. I think it'll be really pretty. Always, at the beginning I'm all stressed about cutting into lumber and making the wrong cuts and having to do things over again, wasting material. And now at this point, what I'm concerned with is, if I start to stress this and blow out the glue joints and things come apart, now I've got a lot of work to do to get back to this this point. So I got to be careful. Okay, so that's what an OG bit does. I think for the last routing maneuver I'm going to do is once the cabinet is assembled, then I'll run through a cove on the top. So again, I'll run it so that there's a tiny reveal here, and it'll just be a cove instead of be an S shape. So it'll be, let's see, it'll be like that. It'll be kind of a, you can make a round over with this, or you can run it closer. I may take the bearing off because I want to run that closer and get a reveal on the top and on the side. So I think I can do that with this bit. 1/2-inch corner round, it's called. So the urns are starting to take shape here. You can see this. The missing pieces here are the, I think it goes that way, the front piece. And once the front pieces, the front and back pieces on the top are glued on, then I route a detail in those. It's mostly a round over, a large round over. The other detail that goes on is the little corner piece here. And I'll pull this off. Actually, that's, yeah, so they're glued to the top, not the bottom. So anyway, these corner pieces go on. Another thing is corners like this. So this is the finished end of the top. I had to design this myself from a picture. If I had to do it again, I'd make that a little longer, maybe 1/4 of an inch longer, just so it gives a little more of a, it would give a little more weight to the top when you look at it. So this is a very harsh edge here. I think a little round over there would be nice. I can't route around over there now because I've glued that on. So I can break that with a sander or whatever, and that's okay. Another thing is I haven't sanded a lot of this. I really should have, because sanding it now while it's assembled is going to be much more difficult. As well as these pieces. This is a harsh edge. I want to round that over, and probably that edge too. I've started sanding some of these loose pieces. There's mill marks on some of these that I need to get rid of. And a lot of this is going to be hand sanding. I can run my orbital sander across here and probably the ends, so I can sand that, but all of these coves need to all be sanded by hand. They say that woodworking is 10% inspiration and 90% sanding. And that's kind of the way it goes sometimes. I don't want to sand the top too much because I have my witness marks here I don't want to lose. And same with the adjoining top pieces that'll be glued back on here. I don't want to lose the witness marks. But that's easy. Once I get that all glued together, then I can give that a really good sanding in one shot. Once that's all sanded, I can route that detail, and then that'll be hand sanding to finish up that detail. A word about sanding. I took a course, I took a couple courses on woodworking, and one of them was about finishing. And of course, when you talk about finishing, you start talking about sanding. And one of the things I remember distinctly the instructor saying is, the problem a lot of people have with sanding is they don't know when they're done sanding, which I think is very true. Now, before I go into that more, I want to talk about what I believe are basically two categories of sanding. You can have sanding to prep a surface for a finish, and you can also have sanding to remove material or shape a piece. And so you quite often see a big sander, a big belt sander, a disc sander, that kind of thing. So somebody might be making a nice curve on a piece with this sander. So there's all that kind of thing with sanders. So there's two very distinct forms of sanding. One is the milling process. One is the forming process and the shaping process. One is prepping for finish process. And the former uses very rough grit sandpaper. 80 grit is very common for that sort of thing. You can get down to 60 and 40 grit. 40 grit is basically gravel off your driveway stuck to a piece of paper. Very, very coarse. Finishing sanding, yes, you can start at 80. And you see I've got a bit of work to do. I don't know if you can see this, but there's a little mill mark that the planer left here. So I need to sand that and get rid of that mill mark. A little bit of snipe or something going on there. So that I need to start with a coarse paper. I usually start with a 80 grit. Now you have to be careful with 80 grit because it's very coarse and it'll take off material pretty fast. But I'll start with an 80 grit, get the mill marks and the snipe and all that kind of stuff out of the piece, and then work up through grits. Go to 100, 120, 150, 220. And you can stop between 220 and 320, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So the beginning with the 80 grit, that's to make it smooth. That's to make the surface, take out mill marks, take out snipe, make it a nice smooth finish. Every grit after that is removing the sanding marks from the previous grit. And you'd be surprised how little sanding it takes to accomplish that. So I'll do a bit of work on this, and then I'll start going up through the grits until I get to at least 220, and I'm not sure I'll go to 320. A little trick I learned is that if you're going to stain a piece, I'm not going to stain this, but if you're going to stain a piece and you have, say, some millwork like this, you see the millwork on this end here and this end here. This is face grain, this is end grain. And if you're going to stain a piece, end grain will absorb more stain than will side grain, usually. I can't think of any examples, but where it wouldn't. But I'm sure somebody's going to say, well, it's not a rule. This is partly end grain as well. This is side grain, but that'll absorb more stain. So if you're using a little bit of a darker stain, it doesn't have to be real dark, but if you're changing the color, that will be darker than this. So what you can do there, if you sand your project to say 220, and then you sand your end grain to 320 or even 400, sand that real nice and smooth, it'll absorb less stain. Okay, so that'll blend with your side grain better if the end grain is sanded to 320 or 400. A higher grit is the point. This would be hard because it's not a straight profile. I did a big oak coffee table once, and I used that principle on that coffee table, and it worked perfectly. The transition between the face grain and the end grain on the side of the table was absolutely indistinguishable when I stained it. So the stain was perfectly uniform between the two types of grain. So enough talk, and get to work doing some more sanding. This is going to be boring. So I take that off. I can hit this surface with my random orbit sander. This is not a very expensive sander, and you can tell when you use it. Well, they're surprisingly expensive. That's $50 or $60 sander, which you wouldn't think because it's kind of a crappy sander, but it does the job. So that's an 80 grit I have in there. So I'm not gonna linger here. I don't want to remove a lot of material. I just want to get the smoothing process started. So that's it for that. I don't have any mill marks I need to take care of or anything, so there's no need to linger with that. I'll just hit the bottom of it in like fashion. Okay, I have a little bit of squeeze out. I'm going to take care of that because I want my bottom piece to fit in there nice and secure, nice and flat. A little bit of squeeze out there too. So a little chisel, that'll take care of all that. Everything else here I can take care of hand sanding. You know, you can even just take that. I find it handy to fold it and then just run it along. You can get in that cove, run that along, run that up against that reveal, run along the edge. And that's really all you need. If you're not trying to get rid of anything, not trying to compensate, get rid of mill marks, anything, you don't need to spend a long time sanding. When you work up through the grits, don't take shortcuts and miss grits. There's a considerable amount of dust coming off of that just with the handwork, so you can see that it's making a difference. That big coffee table I made, it was quite, well, not ornate, but there was a lot of mill work and a lot of this kind of thing. I sanded that 4 or 5 times by hand. It was a lot of work, but it wasn't that bad because often that's all you need, right? Just that much. And when you're using this coarse grit too, don't start to deform your millwork, because you certainly can do that if you're not careful. Okay, and that's nice. Okay, we'll just touch the bottom groove here a little bit. We don't need to do much there because it's covered with the lid. The lid, of course, as I stated, the lid's on the bottom on this. This is a pretty harsh edge on the bottom, and that's okay. I like that detail. However, the sharper your edge, the more likely it's going to get damaged, and then it'll look terrible. So I'm actually going to take some of that off. A little more pleasing to the touch, and it'll look better over time. Have to be careful stressing this glued up little base. Okay, look at that, it's pretty flat. I will put some feet on the bottom when I'm done. Okay, set that one aside, and I'm going to do the cherry wood one in like manner. Probably the cherry wood doesn't take as much sanding because it's not as hard. The walnut's pretty hard. A bigger piece I would round over that stuff with a router, but this is a pretty small piece, and router would be pretty harsh, and roundover bits aren't usually that small. Okay, did I hit it all? I'm not convinced I did that end. I won't likely sand that kind of an area again with a lighter grit. It's just to, you know, give it a light going over. I'll put this back on the machine because I haven't done this. Okay, these I've been sanding, and they took a bit of work because they had copious mill marks. To do those, I hung them over the edge of my table saw this way. You see me set that down. When I lift it off the workpiece, this begins to spin. And if you, especially the more coarse grits, if that's spinning, you let it down, it'll make, you can even see right there, a really big, nasty swirl on your workpiece. So that's what I'm trying to avoid with that. Those mill marks will show up later on when you put your finish on, and it's too late then. So I've gone over this, I think. And then the rest is handwork, of course. This end piece sure ended up being light. Okay. A little bit of roughness going on here. It's going to take some work. Again, this is kind of glued up here, but not by much, so I have to be careful. I'll just try and hit this little panel right here a bit. So you can really see now, often the sander makes the wood a little bit lighter. So you can see the mill marks that I'm dealing with here. It's going to take a bit of work. Okay, pretty much got rid of that. Now we'll do the walnut. So this is going to take a bit of work too. I can even feel that. It's kind of a depression between here and here. So, away we go. You can probably see that better now. Okay, that's hard to do. I got the same kind of thing here. Yeah, and again. Those don't need to be sanded on the inside. This is not near finished here. Another thing to do with the sanding is, especially on the cherry wood, you get a little bit of burning from the tools. You can try and sand that away, although it's not just superficial, so it doesn't work that well. You can make an impact, but now I need to get in here, both the underside of that top and that cove. See if I can get that burn mark. Yeah, that was pretty slight, so that came out of there for the most part. There's a sharp detail right here at the corner of these, so that's kind of nice, I think, and I don't want to sand that away. Now here I'm going against the grain, which isn't good, but I have no choice. I need to make sure this panel is not proud of this top, because the next piece needs to go real snug. But I can't sand this away. It's important to get those sharp reveals. Here's where it's really important to get that smooth with the router. If you don't, oh, that's such a pain. Very hard to fix with the sandpaper. Okay. Did I do all three sides? I think I did. Feels good. I'll have to go through the grits again when I get this top assembled, so that I can sand the top. Because I haven't put this assembly together, then I'm going to leave that for that time. So that was an 80 grit. And we get a 120 grit and we do it all over again. Here's some trivia. This router bit, actually this router bit is it's similar, but it's called a panel raising bit. When you talk about a raised panel, it's not really a raised panel, but what it is it's a panel that was thick and you've cut the edges thin so it looks like the center is raised. So that's a raised panel bit for cutting that one. For cutting this one, this is kind of an S shape. So there's a convex and then a concave in that profile. That's called a Roman ogee. And it's not a Roman orgy, because that's something different. This is a Roman ogee, just so you know. Okay, got that, and that. So we're gonna do that all over again on these. Under the top. Again, I'm going against the grain, I can't help it. And it's hard to do that cove in there as well. I really should have done that before I assembled. Get things out of order sometimes. And this is definitely against the grain. You can get things called sanding sponges, a piece of thin sandpaper glued to a sponge. And the idea is to go around contours like this. That's a 120, so that's the grit I'm using. They work pretty good. You've got to be careful though if you get sanding on top of a detail like that sharp reveal that I'm trying to preserve. They'll round it right over, and if you're doing this, then it'll make that convex flat. But you know, for a lot of things, they're useful. Go right along that reveal with it. A little bit expensive, I think, for what they are. And I like to do this with the curves. Okay. I think I've got that. So we go down a grit, or, well, we go up a grit. That's 120. So that's a 150. I think I'm going to go to 220 on this because I'm not putting a film finish. I'm putting an oil finish, I believe. Probably tung oil, but I haven't set that in stone. These two pieces, I'm going to try and showcase these on the front. They're kind of near a knot, and the figure on them is quite striking, I think. I've got quite a bit of mill marks. They're harder wood than the regular grain, but I'm going to cut these down, so I'll probably lose a lot of those mill marks when I do that.